I'm going to show you how to get free mulch delivered and to turn mulch into compost with weeds. But first, 5-second intro. The first option is to use a service called chip drop. Arborists use the service and you just specify where you want the chips dropped. They'll drop it for free. You can donate and get them dropped faster, but you'll still get a drop usually eventually. Why would they do this? Well, they usually have to pay a dumping fee, 20 bucks or something, and drive out of their way to go dump the mulch. So you actually benefit them by letting them drop wood chips and mulch. Downsides are sometimes you get kind of invasive species. You can specify which ones you want, not always accurate. I find a better option is if you see an arborist or tree service cutting on the side of the road, literally park next to them out of the road, just walk up to them and say, hey, do you want a place to dump that? Especially if they're already in your neighborhood. I'm embarrassed to ask people in the store who work there to show me where things are, but I have no shame in asking that. Like I said, they'll gladly help you. It helps them too, so win-win. If you're gonna try hot composting mulch, leaves, you're gonna need to add a lot of nitrogen material constantly, green material. But there's something with that people still get wrong or don't fully understand. Your browns to green ratio is not the same as your carbon to nitrogen ratio. People repeat it all the time. 2 browns to 1 green is a good ratio for hot compost. But this by itself is 96% carbon. It has a ratio of 20 carbon to 1 nitrogen. Why do we call it a green material, a nitrogen material? Because it has more nitrogen than, say, wood chips. But these wood chips, 500 carbon to 1 nitrogen. So if we did the 2 parts brown to 1 part green, meaning 1, and then another part of browns, we now have a carbon to nitrogen ratio of about 360 to 1. You want a carbon to nitrogen ratio of about 30 to 1, maybe even less for hot composting. If you're really ambitious about composting those wood chips though, you could add in something even more concentrated with nitrogen, like a fresh manure, balance it out, or some blood meal, or just have the pile 8 parts green to 2 parts brown. Natural urea nitrogen. I'm just kidding. You could do that, but that would. But not all browns are 500 to 1. Leaves are about 70 to 1. So how do we get around that? One way to get around it is just don't try to compost wood chips if you're not good at hot composting already. If you're gonna try to hot compost wood chips, try to get somebody that'll drop you a load of mostly branching material. Stuff that has more leaves, more of the branches. The pieces aren't as thick and solid. They'll break down quicker and they'll have more nitrogen inside the material. You can find specific green material that has an even higher amount of nitrogen, like crabgrass is, I think, about 12 to 1, but it's pretty risky. This stuff spreads everywhere. This is also why if you've ever cut a bunch of grass at once, raked it into a pile, it'll be steaming by itself, because fresh grass just by itself has about 20 carbon to 1 nitrogen ratio, which is perfect for compost. So yes, you can just have a giant pile of grass clippings and make compost out of it. It might not be the best, but it works. Regardless, the nitrogen's gonna fade over time. It's gonna heat up and then it might cool off. Then you can kind of go back and add a little nitrogen little by little, stuff it in the core if you want, heat it back up again, rinse and repeat. If you're confident that you can get the pile hot and maintain that heat, you can use some weeds as your nitrogen source. But within that, I try to pick certain things over others. You would want a leafy green, moist, soft material of weed. Moist. Another thing to look for is that it doesn't seed so short to the ground, because if you're gonna mow over it, you're gonna get a lot of those seeds in the mower. Moist in the weeds will decompose if your pile's hot enough, but just to be safe, I go for moist material that grows tall, doesn't put out a lot of seeds immediately. So something like this dog nettle is perfect for me. I just cut it down and I can grind it up a few times with the mower. Another advantage to that is if you're mowing over everything, you might run into things like poison ivy that get lodged in your mower accidentally. And if you're not trusting that you're gonna get those temperatures, that's not fun. So by itself, I believe this has a carbon to nitrogen ratio, something like 14:1, which is really good, very high nitrogen, but it's hard to find exactly the carbon to nitrogen ratio on every single weed there is or plant. But there is some good information out there. I'll include a list that has some common weeds or plants, things that you would just find growing naturally, and you can see the different ratios between them. So if you have a mower with a bagger, instead of the mulch setting, just turn it to the bag setting. We won't keep the wheels too low down, just in case there's some extra weed seeds that are just lingering on the ground. The kick test. Dump it in. We don't want pieces like this. This will take forever at this size to decompose. You can sift it out as you turn the pile. Now, if you don't have a bagger, you could just dump it right next to your compost pile and then use whatever mower you do have to grind it up. You can then grind it over and over if you want it really fine. Usually with all the material of your compost pile, the more finely you can shred it, the better it's going to be for heating up. Now, I've tried all the different ways of stacking the pile, the lasagna method, which it just doesn't make sense to me, especially if you have really soft materials like ryegrass. It all mat together and basically just provide you layers where water can't pass, air can't pass. It doesn't make sense to me. Same with the whole stacking pallets and then flipping it over to the next pallet. I think anybody who's actually tried those for a long time realizes the people making videos about it probably haven't actually done it themselves. One thing I do recommend though is the pitchfork, and generally adding the nitrogen kind of towards the center of the pile once it starts to cool down. Another big thing is the speed at which you acquire the materials. You want to acquire all the materials at once if possible. If you can gather everything in the same day rather than little by little adding to it, you're going to get that biomass that's needed for it to heat up. A lot of this is thermal heat. Basically, the bigger the pile it is, the hotter it's going to get regardless of the bacteria or the composting process. We want it at least, they say 3 by 3 by 3. I think 6 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet, honestly. And then you go to turn the pile every so often when temperatures start to cool. And at that time, you would take the outer part of the pile, pretty much shovel that off, usually right next to it, and then that'll become the new center of the pile. So whatever you add on that, then you can add your extra nitrogen materials if you need. Using a pitchfork also helps to break in some air pockets and divide a little bit of space in between the particle sizes. I call them particles, but by that I just mean any individual piece of something that water, air can pass through. Usually you want the finer you can get it, the more it's going to heat up and compost, but you also want a little bit of texture in there to avoid that matting where it blocks the water and everything. Stuff like this, way too big. Here's what I believe to be a massive helper on starting your pile. As you're layering it in, you can have a little sprinkler going to make sure that all of it's getting wet, because once your pile is huge, water might not get all the way down, especially if you have layers matting up like with ryegrass and stuff. With the right amount of water, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, particle size, bacteria, all these things play together for getting that compost to heat up to 140, 160 degrees, which after turning it a few times, you can sometimes get lucky and compost the whole pile in 18 days or so of usable compost. It's tricky with the wood chips, but at the very least, this will make it a lot faster. If you like this video, please give me a like, subscribe, share it, comment something, even just telling me I'm a friggin' genius. Helps the algorithm, helps the existential dread, the notion that everything is futile, keeps me making videos. What? Moist.